an Airbus A320 crashed into the water while carrying out a climbing maneuver after an aborted approach to Sochi airport at night with weather conditions below the established minima for runway 06. The ground speed dropped and the aircraft descended until it contacted the water and broke up, killing 113 people on board. 2 May 2006. Armavia Flight 967 was preparing its routine flight from Yerevan, Armenia to Sochi, Russia. "113 occupants were on board the flight. Among them, 105 passengers, including 5 children and 1 baby, 2 pilots, 5 flight attendants, and 1 engineer. The captain of flight was Grigor Grigorian, who was 40 years old and had 5,458 hours of flying experience, including 1,436 hours on Airbus A320. The first officer was Arman Daptian, who was 29 years old with total 2,185 hours of flying experience, including 1,022 hours on the Airbus A320. The aircraft lifted off at an indicated airspeed of about 160 knots from Yerevan Airport without any notable events. The target flight level 340 was reached within 20 minutes from takeoff. The flight was over Georgia, and the Tbilisi controller informed the flight crew about current weather in Sochi is 2000 by 170 for both runways 06 and 02, which was below the established minima for landing at Sochi. The minima at Sochi were 170 by 2500 for runway 06 and 220 by 3000 for runway 02. The crew contacted the controller of Sochi approach control and then asked them to clarify if the weather could be expected to improve. The captain contacted the Tbilisi controller and advised that they want to return back to Yerevan. At that moment, the aircraft was at a distance of 180 kilometers from Sochi airport at an altitude of 33,900 feet. Then Tbilisi controller cleared the crew for turnaround by making a left turn and head to Baru's waypoint. Then Sochi controller asked the crew's final decision on whether they will continue to Sochi or go back to Yerevan. The captain replied that they are returning back to Yerevan. Again, after 10 minutes, the crew asked the controller of Sochi about the latest observed weather, even they had already decided to return back. And the controller informed the crew that visibility is 3,600 meters and the cloud ceiling is 170 meters. The crew told Sochi controller that they had deputies on board. This information was not true, which shows that the crew intentionally misinformed the controller in order to obtain a positive weather forecast. When the Sochi approach controller informed the crew about the weather, the captain decided to fly back towards Sochi. This shows that the crew appeared to be eager to land in Sochi and nowhere else. The further conversation shows that the crew did not even wish to bother the Sochi approach controller once more, so as not to get an unfavorable weather forecast from him. They began to descend initially. This could be evidence of crew fatigue. It seems that especially the captain was in a state of high psycho-emotional strain, with an imperative to land at Sochi as soon as possible. The approach controller cleared the airplane for descent to 6,000 feet and reported the observed weather at Sochi for runway 06. The flight was cleared for descent to 2,000 feet. The glide slope had been captured and the aircraft started descending along the glide slope, following the approach pattern. During the aircraft descent, the controller advised the crew that the flight altitude was too high and informed them of the weather condition in Sochi and cleared to descend to 1,800 feet. The crew reported to the controller that they were on the glide slope, with the landing gear extended and ready for landing. Now the aircraft was stabilized on the glide slope in the landing configuration and was completely ready for landing. But now the controller advised the crew about the observed cloud ceiling at 300 feet and instructed the crew to stop their descent and carry out a right turn and climb up to 2,000 feet, and also to get in touch with the holding controller. Then the captain made a control input on the side stick forward to 9.7 degree, which resulted in decrease of the pitch angle. The altitude began to decrease. Now the co-pilot intervened and moved the side stick to the left stop position to counter the increasing right bank, while the captain continued making control inputs to increase the right bank. Apparently, the co-pilot was trying to counter the bank only. However, while moving the side stick sideways to the stop position, he had made forward control inputs on it. The captain twice moved the side stick halfway backwards, possibly reacting to ground proximity warning system. But at the same time, the co-pilot was making nose-down inputs, which might have led the captain to believe that the aircraft response to the control inputs in the pitch channel was not adequate. Despite the actions undertaken by both pilots at the last seconds of the flight to deflect the elevator to the nose-up position, the plane crashed on the Black Sea and was destroyed. The investigation was done by Interstate Aviation Committee, Russia. According to them, the accident took place while carrying out a climbing maneuver after an aborted approach to Sochi airport at night with weather conditions below the established minima for runway. While performing the climb with the autopilot disengaged, the captain, being in a psycho-emotional stress condition, made nose-down control inputs due to the loss of pitch and roll awareness. This started the abnormal situation. Subsequently, the captain's input in the pitch channel were insufficient to prevent development of the abnormal situation into the catastrophic one. Along with the inadequate control inputs of the captain, the contributing factors to development of the abnormal situation into the catastrophic one were also the lack of necessary monitoring of the aircraft descent parameters by the co-pilot and the absence of proper reaction by the crew to the ground proximity warning system. Just remember that at a moment they almost returned back to Yerevan. What is your opinion about the video? Please share your thoughts. Give a thumbs up if you are watching until now, and please don't forget to subscribe the channel. Thank you for watching.